All right, guys. I am sorry to say that we have officially started war, and by we I mean the US started war with Iran. Um, I will say for me personally, it's not a surprise. I've been I could see this from a mile away. In my previous videos, I talked about how I thought that the ICE in Minneapolis thing was a huge distraction, not only from the files, but also a distraction from a lot of tensions rising, potentially leading an end result of war in Iran. And I'm not looking for credit for that or anything. I'm just saying I've been mentioning it. It's something that I've been saying, and it was no surprise to me. I'll be that no be. Um, that's no comfort to me or anyone else. Just because you know something's going to happen, it doesn't make it any easier. But yeah, so that's where we're at. And I just want to say that regardless their reasons or whatever the reason they say that we're going to go to war for, it's not going to stop me from doing what I had already originally planned with the files, which is looking through them and trying to find any information that might be relevant or important for the American people to know. So I don't want to completely ignore the situation, but I also don't want to get distracted by it because I and several other people have work to do. And yeah, that's definitely going to be a huge wrench thrown into it, but we were expecting that. That was anticipated. And I guess I can't speak for everybody, but I do speak for myself when I say that if they thought this was going to distract people from this, then I guess they are still gravely misunderstanding how upset everybody is by this. And if anything, it really just proves the point further that they really do not care about American lives or American children or American people at all. They don't. I mean, they are fully prepared and willing to send us to fight and die in their war. So I really just do not see them caring at all. And I really feel like them doing this really just proves that point. I know they want to tell you that there's a threat of nuclear weapons. Yeah, well, they've been saying that since 1995. They've been saying that for several years. It has been a threat, it has been a scare tactic of many, many years. In addition to that, I'm pretty sure that America just took out they literally dropped a bomb and they were bragging about how American weapons can go, you drop it and it goes several feet through the ground and it can hit the target. It was a huge bragging right for them to do that, and now all of a sudden we're afraid of nuclear weapons again. I'm not buying it. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, they do not care, and let me repeat this. They do not care how many goyim die for their war. Okay? They just don't. And with that, let's get into the files. So this episode, we're going to focus on some of the medical aspect to Jeffrey and in respect to his autopsy. In the past, we've talked about who was involved, or at least whom we can see that's not redacted on the reports, was involved in his autopsy. And now I want to talk about some of the findings other than the broken thyroid and neck situation because that one is very controversial in and of itself. But let's put that aside for a moment and let's actually talk about some of the other organs that are also, in my opinion, very questionable. So, one of them that stood out to me was the autopsy regarding his heart. And you might be asking, well, why does his heart matter? Like, what does that have to do with anything? Well, to most people, maybe nothing, but for me, it stood out, and I'll say why. My background, my professional background, just so happens to be in the medical field. And it just so happens to be cardiac specialized. So my degree and my field of education is in the field of studying cardiology and cardiac related things. Okay? I will put a photo here for reference in case you don't believe me. It's fine if you don't. But so immediately with my background and my knowledge, I saw what they said about his heart and it stood out to me immediately because it was like, oh wow, that's a significant heart condition to some extent. And it was odd because you would think with that type of a heart condition that it would be mentioned at some point. At some point beyond just the autopsy of his deceased body, there's no diagnosis of this condition outside of that reported anywhere, actually. And I found it to be odd. And so I looked into it. And let me show you what I found. All right, so I just want to give a disclaimer here before we jump into this. At some point in the video, I am going to show like cadaver hearts and things like that because it's relevant. And if that is something that grosses you out, I would, you know, maybe just skip past that part or maybe don't watch it all. I don't know. But if that's something that makes you squeamish, I mean, there isn't like any like blood or anything like that. It's not like somebody's like just having open, I'm not going to show like a picture of someone having open heart surgery on the table or anything like that. But um, just a cadaver heart or for like, stuff you would find in an article, things like that. Okay. Also, I am using the web again. I have already looked into the files regarding this situation and I have verified that these files are real. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is actually in the autopsy that I've covered in previous episodes that are in the Epstein files on the official DOJ website. And just for anyone who, in case anybody doesn't know what the web is it is a website similar to ChatGPT that has all of the Epstein files that are available to us, and it takes those out of the files. When you ask it a question, it will search up that information for you so that you don't have to look through all the files yourself. So really what it does is it goes and finds that information and then it even provides the document for you so you can even fact check it, which is really nice. So far I found the website to be pretty credible, and so that's what we're going to be using today. All right, so let's get into this here. I'm going to start out with um his hypertension report. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what hypertension means, hypertension is the medical term for high blood pressure. Okay, so it's reported that he possibly had an issue with having high blood pressure, and that's important, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So Jeffrey Epstein's reported heart condition and hypertension. The Bureau of Prisons medical records show that Jeffrey Epstein was diagnosed with essential primary hypertension during his incarceration in 2019. The diagnosis was documented as by HX. So HX in medical terminology stands for history. And then that even explains here too, which indicates it was based on medical history rather than being a new diagnosis made in prison. So that's important. that's important because it means that he wasn't diagnosed as having high blood pressure in prison. He was diagnosed, they took a previous diagnosis of having high blood pressure and put that in his notes there, which I found to be quite interesting considering there hasn't been any reports in previous diagnoses. He actually had a huge network of people that he worked with. He could go see the doctor whenever he felt like it, and most reports were very normal. Like he was not really reported to have many health issues. So to have it just say by history is kind of weird. And then here, what's nice is you can pull up the actual report here where it was reported and on the day. So right here we have, I don't know if maybe I'm in the way. I might have to fix, yeah, certainly am. Let me move out of the way, guys. Yeah, there we go. So it says right here, I don't know if you can see it, if you can zoom in on your screen at all, but it says essential primary hypertension on July 30th of 2019. And that was reported by Dr. Robert Beaudoin. I think that's how you pronounce it, Dr. Robert Beaudoin. Now, in a news report in 2020, they were reporting on the COVID conditions in the prison, and it was noted that Dr. Robert Beaudoin was actually the medical director. When I Googled if he was the medical director at the time that Jeffrey was at the prison, Google told me that that was information reserved for for people internally only. That is not public privileged information to know who the medical director is. I just thought that was interesting, considering that in 2020 it was reported with no issues at all to say who the medical director was in that news report. Yeah. So, anyway, moving on. So, we have that by history report put in. Okay. It's interesting because you'd think with a blood pressure, like you wouldn't need to go by their history. Okay. You could just check their blood pressure, right? Like you could just put the blood pressure cuff on. I mean, it takes like 2 seconds. And then you'd be like, oh wow, yep, your blood pressure's high. And that's that. But no. Apparently they had to go by history. It's almost like, oh, we need to go by your history to know what your eye color is. Like, we're not just going to go and look and see what your eye color is. We're just going to go based off of the documented history. Like, I can see your eye color right now. So I just thought that was interesting, especially since none of this, nothing else is by history. Sleep apnea, they have that in here. They have uh hypertriglyceridemia, uh constipation. Like did you need to go and get his constipation history as well? No, you didn't. You just put he's constipated with no problems. He also has varying blood pressure checks. So on July 28th of 2019, and this date is important. This date's important because he had a medical doctor come and see him on this day at around 6:15 in the morning, which is unusual. And I can't find a lot of information about this doctor, and it's a little bit it's questionable. I have lots of questions around this day and this particular doctor that came to see him. But I find it interesting because he had a couple blood pressure readings, one as 157 over 91 and one as 138 over 80. Now, this top blood pressure is a little high. It's a little high. If you have 157 over 91 for a really long period of time, I could see it causing some cardiac issues over time if it's constantly at this level. Okay, and even at this, I've seen much higher heart rate or not heart rates, blood pressures than this. But, I would say that that is elevated to have it be constantly at that rate, constantly. But he also, on the same day, had a blood pressure reading of 138 over 80. Now, that bottom number there is a normal range. The top number is a little elevated. So, a normal blood pressure for reference, guys, is 120 over 80. That's textbook. Okay. Textbook blood pressure, 120 over 80. Is anybody's blood pressure ever 100% textbook? No. You can have a high blood pressure from working out. If you work out, like your body naturally, your heart's going to work harder. Everything's going to be going, your blood pressure is going to increase. That's normal. It should come down immediately after exercise. So should your heart rate. That is normal. Okay. So another thing that can cause high blood pressure is if you're in pain, if you're stressed, all kinds of things. If you're scared, if you're anxious, there's a lot of things that can cause it that are not like immediately medical related, otherwise really just more of like a natural response. But so with that being said, it's hard to say. I wasn't there, obviously, so it's hard to say whether these blood pressures were the result of a normal physiological response to outside stimuli, whether it be stress, anxiety, exercise, pain, whatever. We won't know. But what we do know is that there is variation in these numbers, okay? So we have the blood pressure going up, we have the blood pressure going down, and then here, a couple days later, completely normal, 114 over 84, beautiful blood pressure. I love that blood pressure. And then again, 125 over 60, normal. 60 is a little bit low. Obviously, it should, if you're considering normal, it would be 80, but anything, some people's blood pressure runs a little low, some people's blood pressure runs a little high. Like I said, to have somebody's blood pressure be 100% textbook is rare. Um, but it's, everybody's blood pressures, they kind of have their own normal. Same with heart rates. Some people just naturally have a higher heart rate. Doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them. Some people have naturally lower heart rate. Again, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them. It all just depends on the context and it depends on your overall medical history. But with that being said, I think these blood pressures, especially considering how high they were, are fairly decent. Now, looking again at this, now July 23rd, here we have 140 over 85. So, again, we are having varying degrees in blood pressure. Now, you might say, oh, well, maybe he took his blood pressure medication, it came down. Well, there are no reports that he was ever prescribed blood pressure medication. So, if he was taking blood pressure medication, it wasn't his. And he was never actually diagnosed with high blood pressure that we're aware of until he actually entered the prison on that date of that was reported on 7/30/2019, and it was reported as per his history. So right here, we're just going based off of the things that we see and the things that we know. Medications prescribed. So he was prescribed medications. He had docusate sodium, milk of magnesia, omega-3, methylprednisone, bisocoldol. He was prescribed insulin for his prediabetes, though records indicate it may not have been routinely administered. So, while the prison medical records confirm Epstein had hypertension by history, the collection does not contain his pre incarceration medical records that would show when he was first diagnosed with high blood pressure or how long he had been living with the condition. So, I found this to be interesting as well. So, in the initial medical intake on July 9th of 2019, it says it shows Epstein denied having hypertension when specifically asked during his Bureau of Prisons intake assessment. So he gets in on July 9th and he's doing his medical assessment and he denied ever having hypertension on the 9th. And then all of a sudden he has a by history report of hypertension on the 30th. Interesting. So keep in mind, remember, folks, on the 28th of July, he had a special visit from a doctor. Okay. So he has this visit. So he gets booked in on the 9th, reports no history of having hypertension at all. Then he gets a visit from a doctor on the 28th of July. And on July 30th, he is then seen by the who we can assume is the medical director of the prison, which I guess I can't say for sure because they've decided that is an internal only thing. But considering he was the medical director in 2020, I'm going to go ahead and assume that he was also the director in 2019. I could be wrong on that, but based off of the information, they leave me to assume that. So that's what I'm going to go with. So he was then visited by the medical director of the prison. I mean, look at those strings he can pull to get like the top person, right? Not just any doctor of the prison. No. He gets the director of the prison. But anyway, so he gets visited, and now it's reported again. Didn't check his blood pressure, but just has a history of high blood pressure. Okay. All right. Sure. So why I'm bringing this up is because in the official autopsy report, it is reported that Epstein has a wall thickness in his heart of 1.4 centimeters. Okay, that is a diagnosis of what is called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, guys. Okay, so hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is a condition where the heart walls, the wall thickness of the heart, begins to get thicker. Okay, you know what? As a matter of fact, don't let me explain it to you. I could explain it to you. I'm gonna let this person explain it to you because they're definitely gonna be able to explain it a lot better.
Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy usually affects your left ventricle by thickening its walls. This happens because your heart muscle cells grow bigger. In some people, scar tissue may form between the muscle cells over time. Even though your cells are bigger, your heart stays about the same size. As a result, your left ventricle can't hold as much blood. The left ventricle may also become stiffer, contract harder, and relax less between contractions. These problems make it harder for your heart to fill and pump more blood as is needed during exercise. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy can be non-obstructive or obstructive.
Okay, so I mean, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is not only something that takes several years of schooling to understand, but just like the heart itself is. So I'm not going to spend an entire hour explaining to you all of the different complexities that can go along with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy if you want to learn about it. There's a lot of cool, interesting articles you can go find and look. And I think that you should. It's really cool, actually. But that's coming from me, and that's my field of study, and I just so happen to enjoy it. Maybe not everybody else does, but whatever. Anyway, moving on. I am saying this all to say that I want you guys to have an understanding though, like at least a basic understanding of what this is, because once you understand why this is weird, then you'll understand why I don't think that that was his heart. So, let's pull this up here. Right here, a normal left ventricular wall thickness in adults is typically defined as less than 1.1 centimeters to 1.2 centimeters. Okay, so his was reported as 1.4 centimeters. A measurement of 1.4 centimeters is generally classified as having moderate left ventricular hypertrophy, representing an abnormal thickening of the heart muscle. So, why is this important? Well, because hypertension is, or blood pressure, is the, right here, thickened muscle often caused by chronic hypertension, high blood pressure, or aortic stenosis. Aortic stenosis is a valve issue when one of your valves gets too calcified and it doesn't open all the way. And it causes pressure backup of blood flow and it can cause your heart to work harder. So essentially, whenever your heart's a muscle, right? So whenever you work out your arms or your legs or any muscle for that matter, it gets stronger. You build the muscle, it gets thicker, right? Your heart is no different. It's muscle. So if it has to work harder for any reason, the muscle is going to get thicker. And as you guys saw in that video, the cavity starts to get way smaller, and then therefore you have less blood filling up, which means you then have less oxygen going out to your body because that's how we get oxygen is from our blood. So that's why the blood pressure reports are significant because essentially they are insinuating that he had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with a moderate measurement. He didn't have mild, he had moderate hypertrophy. That's significant. That's significantly thick. So if you look at, let me pull up some pictures. So this is the picture part where, let me show you guys. So here we go. So this is a normal heart. This is the thickness right here. Okay. I don't know if you can see. Oh, you can't see it. Sorry. My bad. Just get out of the way here. So right here on the right side of the screen is where you have, this is normal, okay? From here to here, it should be anywhere between 0.9 to 1.2 centimeters, okay? And then here, this is what this is. This is this thickness right here over here. So there's a difference between this and this and this and this. It is way thicker. Okay. And then again over here, we have this is normal. So you have your thickness here and then your thickness here. That's a thick heart right there. Okay. And then in return, you have a very small cavity inside. This is where the blood fills up the heart. Okay. And then it squeezes it and pumps it out to your body so you can get oxygen. So I'm sure you can imagine then the symptoms of having something like this then, right? I mean, if you're not getting enough oxygen to your body, we all know like you're going to be short of breath, you're going to be tired. I mean, it's going to affect your life to some extent, especially if you still have high blood pressure. Which it sounds like they made it seem like he had high blood pressure throughout his entire stay without any blood pressure medication or management the entire time. So you mean to tell me that this person had a wall thickness of 1.4 centimeters and a consistent high blood pressure, and they weren't just completely about to pass out? There was never any reports of them passing out. There was never any reports of them being short of breath, having chest pain, anything. No, they always found him to be in good spirits. They always found him to be fine. He always said he was fine. As a matter of fact, he even said, I'm not suicidal, like multiple times. Does that mean that he didn't do it? No, I'm sure there's plenty of people who say, oh, yeah, no, I would never do that. And then they do it anyway. But I'm saying, as far as medically, though, like he seemed to be fine. They listened to his heart, they listened to his chest, they did all kinds of things. But I mean, don't take my word for it. Let's look up. Let's look up. What are the symptoms of LVH? Let's look that up. Right here. You may experience symptoms primarily during physical exertion. Common signs include shortness of breath, fatigue, chest pain, dizziness, or heart palpitations. So, yeah, he wasn't reporting any of that at all. All right, so right here, we have a log from one of the guards, Dr. Armando. And when we look through it here, we're going to scroll down. So at 6:15 in the morning, it says inmate Epstein is awake and says to call the doctor. Okay. And then let's scroll down, and by 6:50 in the morning, it says Dr. Amori to review leg plus to interview Mr. Epstein. Okay. So a doctor is coming in at 6:50 in the morning to review his leg and to interview Mr. Epstein. Interesting. Okay. So this is on the 28th of July. Now remember, well, if you guys remember when we first started this episode, I was telling you that on the 30th, we had the medical director saying that he had a history of high blood pressure. So 2 days later, all of a sudden he has a history of high blood pressure. Well, July 28th, that is about, what is that, like a week, maybe a week and a half before he is no longer with us. So about a week and a half to 2 weeks before he is said to have taken his life, he is visited by this Dr. Amori, who is not noted anywhere else, by the way, guys. Like, I can't find him anywhere else. He wasn't logged in on a visitor log. He isn't logged in anywhere as being involved in his medical care anywhere at any point other than this one log from a guard. Well, I looked into this Dr. Amori. And if it's the same Dr. Amori, then I have even more questions. Why are you randomly coming at 6:50 in the morning? And then 2 days later, he's reported to have high blood pressure randomly after, again, remember, he came into the prison on the 9th of July saying that he has no high blood pressure. Then you see all of these varying blood pressures. Some are high, some are completely normal. Then he gets this mystery doctor visit. And then the medical director says he has a history of high blood pressure. And then about a week and a half later, he's found deceased with a diagnosis of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And not just a diagnosis of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, but a moderate diagnosis of a wall thickness of 1.4 centimeters. Yeah. It almost is, it appears as though this was potentially planned. I mean, all right, guys, let's just look at this for a moment. I'm going to tell you what I think. All right, guys, I'm going to show you something before I get into what I think of what could potentially be happening here. So I'm just going to pull up this report here. So elite doctors served Jeffrey Epstein while treating his girls. Okay. I'm not going to read this whole article. It goes into detail about how, I mean, this is redacted. This is reportedly, it says, an undated photo from the Epstein files appears to show a medical procedure being performed in Jeffrey Epstein's dining room. Okay, so we have somebody holding a light here. We have what appears to be some type of a physician. And then we have someone laying down here. I don't know. There was one report where some girl had to get like a bunch of stitches in her forehead or something, or her head or something, whatever. And I'm not saying whatever because of like, oh, big deal. No, that's a huge deal. I'm just saying that's what we're dealing with here. None of this is news. I'm just repeating it because it's important for the context that we're looking at. So if you want to go read the full article, this is the New York Times, and it's very crazy article. But um, so a small stable of doctors gave VIP medical services to the offender and the women around him. Some doctors bent or broke the ethical rules of their profession. So it goes on to say that there were some doctors who were getting like donations from him, and there were, all kinds of things. Like there are reasons why they were going out of their way and completely ignoring their ethics to do what they were doing. Okay. So I say that to say then this is what it's going to lead me into my determination. So we have a we have the guy, we have Mr. E coming in saying that he has no blood pressure at all. And there's no previous documentation. Actually, I mean, there is. I looked into it. He did have like his own cardiologist that he saw frequently. And by frequently, I just meant like, I mean, yearly, maybe, just as a follow-up, not because he has any sort of like serious condition, but really just to follow up. And he's had, I think his last reported echocardiogram, which is an ultrasound of your heart, was normal. It was unremarkable. He had normal valves in his heart. He had normal function of his heart. He had normal wall thickness of his heart. Um, that was back in 2013. Does that mean that he couldn't have developed that from 2013 to 2019? Of course not. Especially if he actually truly did have high blood pressure, then you would expect to see the heart to thicken over time with high blood pressure. Um, but considering there actually isn't any evidence to suggest that he did have high blood pressure up until he got to the prison, and even then it wasn't really documented until the 30th, and even then it was reported off of history, which there is no history of it. So what history of high blood pressure are they reporting? I can't find any other than of him being in the prison. Like there is none. I don't know. But anyway, so we have that. And then we have this Dr. Emori that you do not find anywhere. There's no visitation logs. He is not involved. He is only involved in his care at that one moment, on that day, at that moment, and that's it. And all he was there to do was to look at his leg and to interview him. To interview him for what? For what? What was he being interviewed for? Well, my best guess, considering he's never heard of again, and the only reason why we even know he was there is because the guards had to document what Jeffrey was doing, and that was their notes. But as far as him actually having like an official documentation, that doesn't exist. Any official medical report, like, oh, I saw Jeffrey and this whatever, and then name signed, there isn't one, not even a redacted one. So, or, maybe it does exist, maybe it's redacted. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Why they need to redact that? Who knows? But as far as I've been able to find, that's the only interaction that he has. Some doctor comes randomly at 6:50 in the morning, interviews him, and he's gone in the night, like poof, like Batman or something. It's just gone. He's gone as quickly as he showed up. Okay, and then 2 days later, the medical director then gives that report of a history of hypertension. So this is just pure speculation here. But if we're speculating, what if, and I think that this person came, maybe they found a cadaver, maybe they found somebody that they knew they could switch him out with that looked very similar to him, or they figured out a way to make the swap or whatever, or a decoy, which we know from previous episodes that they are known to do. So they figured it out, and that was what the interview was about. This interview to, I don't know, talk about what? He's in prison. What are we interviewing? His leg? Like, you don't even hear anything else about his leg being an issue the rest of the time. Like, it's just so weird. Like, he doesn't have an issue with his leg, and all of a sudden he has an issue with his leg. But yeah, so we have that. And then 2 days later, we get the history of blood pressure. So I'm assuming he's like, yeah, we found a reason, a cause. This person has, um, maybe they were somebody who donated their body to science. Maybe. Or maybe they found somebody and they were supposed to go in for like a procedure. I mean, these are doctors that are clearly very corrupt. And they do exist. I don't know if you guys ever noticed or noticed. I don't know if you've ever looked into this, but there is actually a black market for organ harvesting. I know, it's sick. It's disgusting. It's awful. But there is a black market where there are people who are willing to sell organs on the black market, and they get it by means of obviously murder, or there's people who are so desperate for money that they will sell their kidney or whatever on the black market. And then there are elites who have so much money that they can pay like 500 grand or more cash to get an organ that they need so that they don't have to wait on the waiting list. Because we all know, guys, they're better than all of us, Goyim, right? So they're not going to wait on any list for any organ. No. If they need an organ, they're just going to get it. And it happens through a lot of means. I mean, if there's somebody who owes somebody significant some money, then what can happen is they basically threaten them and will say, "Hey, you either come up with the money or we'll kill you and we'll take your organs and sell them. Either way, we're getting the money." And it happens, guys. Look it up. There's documentaries about it. Look up organ black market. It's a thing. It's awful. And how do you think that they get these organs? How do you think they transplant them? Well, of course, corrupt doctors and surgeons. They find warehouses or somewhere, a garage somewhere, and they set up shop there and they do the surgery in the backyard. Yep. So, knowing that, it wouldn't be surprising or completely out of realm to think that during one of those type of operations that they found somebody to make a swap and that somebody, he maybe the interview was like, "Hey, well, he looks just like you." I mean, literally, you guys could be twins. The only problem is he's got a pretty serious heart condition. So I don't know how we're gonna pull that off because you don't have that. Well, if we have the medical director saying that all of a sudden there's not only does he have high blood pressure, but he has a history of high blood pressure, then when the autopsy comes back of him having a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which would be the result of a long-standing history of high blood pressure, well, then it wouldn't be so far-fetched, would it? Right? So my thought is I don't think that it's a coincidence that there's some random doctor that we cannot find a trace of who shows up randomly and isn't reported on any other notes or anything, and now all of a sudden he's got a history of high blood pressure after no known reported history of high blood pressure. And then about a week and a half later, on August 10th, he is pronounced deceased. I don't know. I just thought the timing was weird. I thought the finding was weird. And the heart is not the only organ that is being questioned right now, guys. And we're going to get into that on the next episode. We're also going to get into this Dr. Amori a little bit further because I think I just might have found our Dr. Amori, potentially. Hint, he's not American. So, anyway, try your best to stay sane this week. And I will try my best to stay sane myself and to keep looking through these files, as devastating as they may be. Okay, with that, you guys have a great night.